and welcome everybody. You're joining Jo Marie here from South Glos Parents and Carers, and today we are speaking to...
My name's Kate East and I work with South Gloucestershire Council trying to set up new work around clusters of schools.
So here we are today, we're discussing the Cluster Fund Project, and we want to find a little bit more about exactly what's been happening and what it's about for our parent-carer community. So Kate, tell us a little bit about the Cluster Fund Project, who it is for and what it seeks to achieve.
Okay, well, if I can just go back a little bit and just say why it even started. So back in, I think about 2017, the parent carer group, Rachel Truman and others, did quite a lot of meetings with parents and with schools around what they wanted from SEN. And as a result of that, an SEND strategy was developed in 2018. And one of the actions in there was to work with schools to make sure they can work better together and try and give them some funding in order to meet the children's needs, particularly children at SEN Support. So not so much the children with plans, but the group of children below. And so it took a bit of time to set up, but it's now up and running. So first thought about 2 years ago, but now up and running across all of the schools. And the idea really of the clusters is to try and develop the local offer. So we know what the local offer is for the local authority, but we wanted each of the schools to increase their local offer and to be able to offer a wider range of support and training for SENCOs, schools and parents and children. So it's taken a bit of time, but it's up and running, which is great.
That's wonderful. That's really good to hear, because SEN support is one of the key issues we often hear about from our community, is needing a bit of attention.
We targeted 3 outcomes. So it was set up with 3 key outcomes in mind, and every time I talk about this, I tend to always go on about this. So one was that we knew from our data within the local authority that children at SEN Support, their outcomes are not as good as other children with special needs, those with plans. So we wanted to make sure that we improved outcomes for children at SEN Support. The second outcome was to better identify children's needs, so not make them wait so long to see a professional, but have their needs met earlier. And we hope that by doing that, we can get in preventatively and work more effectively. And in the long run, reduce perhaps the requests for educational needs assessments in due course. And the third area is around behaviour. So we know that in South Gloucestershire, there's a high number of fixed term and permanent exclusions. And so our third outcome is around trying to meet the needs of children that have behavioural needs and to prevent exclusions. So those are the 3 outcomes.
That's really important, because we always say at South Glos Parents and Carers that behaviours are just communicating an unmet need. So
exactly.
So having that ability to explore that and provide, ways of meeting those needs is really, really important. I also need to say as well that I have a child with an EHCP and one on SEN Support, so I sort of experienced both sides. And there is a marked difference, and so I'm really pleased that there's...
I suppose because I'm also, all through my life as an educational psychologist, I've always been absolutely pro-inclusion and supportive of inclusion. So I'm really keen to do this work, which is supporting children in schools, but also to have other options if they're needed for more complex children. In terms of the clusters, you said how do the clusters work? There's 5 areas which are the clusters. We didn't help ourselves at the beginning because we named them Cluster 1, Cluster 2, Cluster 3, and we even had a cluster that's Cluster 4.5 because we merged 2 together, and then Cluster 6. So really, really confusing. So we actually have 5 clusters, but we have a cluster that's called Cluster 6. We are sorting all that out. They're all picking names for individual clusters. So I think watch this space. You'll see different names appearing, which will make a lot more sense. But the clusters were selected based on geographical areas, but also on a footprint that was already there. So we knew that GPs and adult social care had divided South Gloucestershire into these 5 areas. And so what we did is we mapped the same areas onto our clusters. We felt that it was sensible for the council to have the same clusters. You didn't want to be talking about different areas and not understand the differences. But what that does mean is the clusters are quite different sizes. So we have some clusters that have 16 schools, and we have a cluster that has 32 schools. So that is partly because they have smaller schools and partly because the areas vary. So don't assume they're the same sizes, but there are 5 clusters.
So how many schools are taking part in the pilot at the moment? Are all schools taking part, or?
Well, at this point, virtually all schools, and certainly it's open to every school. What we did is we did start with 2 areas. So we started with schools in Patchway and well, that area, and also then in Winterbourne and Brimsham and Yate areas, those 2 clusters. And we started with them as the start of the pilot. We felt we needed to learn from the experiences of setting up each cluster. We've now rolled that out, as I said, to 5, but all schools are available to join. I suppose I should make it clear it's focused on mainstream schools, so it's all primary, secondary, infant, junior schools. It doesn't at this point include special schools or resource bases, although they do help and provide support to some of the clusters as well.
Okay, and presumably that's because in those schools a child would have an EHCP when they enter.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the focus being on SEN support at this point.
Is this type of intervention that are taking place, are they exclusively group-based support, or can there be funding applied for to support an individual child's needs?
Okay, so it's both is the straightforward answer. So
okay.
the funding is, it's probably if I explain how the funding is allocated, that might help answer the question. So the funding is allocated from the local authority. So in total, across all of the 5 clusters, there's £850,000 delegated or devolved to schools.
Okay.
So that's split not equally by 5, because as I said, they are different sizes, the clusters, but that's split across the schools. And in terms of the school, each cluster has a cluster board, which is made up of local authority representation, head teacher representation, SENCOs, and an EP. And sorry, educational psychologist. I'm sure all your parents know what an EP is, but just in case. And they have a board which meets termly. And they are ultimately responsible for how the funding is allocated. So what each of the clusters have done is they've looked at the needs that they have in the cluster, and then they've commissioned services or teams. And they've also commissioned training and resources. So it's really quite open. It's saying, right, these are our children in our area. What is it that we need in order to deliver on those 3 outcomes? So, for example, we've set up some alternative provision to try and support children that have behavioural needs or behaviour that challenges the school. We've set up early college placements for some secondary school children that we know just would be better with a vocational course in year 11. So that's an individual example. We've set up mentoring in some of the clusters. We've accessed speech and language therapy, occupational therapy. What else have we? Parenting support. We've got access to ELSA trained practitioners or Thrive, so those kind of 2 groups supporting parents and families and children in school around their emotional needs. So it's quite a range of provision, and it can be accessed individually. Also, there's quite a lot of group work. So last year we did a lot of work with year 1 children with something called Talk Boost that the speech and language therapist delivered, and that was a language program for children in year 1, and that was group based. So
Oh,
that's a
wow.
long answer to your question, which is yes, it can be individual or group. It depends what the needs of the child are. And the group that I think are really, really important in all of this, I mean, head teachers are always important, but who's really important is the lead SENCOs. And so each cluster has at least one lead SENCO for primary and a lead SENCO for secondary. And they're being given some release time to work with the cluster. And they set up SENCO groups within their locality, within their cluster, which offers advice, support, access to training, access to resources. So we've kind of handed the power to the heads, but also the SENCOs to really look at what an area might need. And it does vary. Sometimes clusters have access to different support because they've done things slightly differently because the needs are different in an area.
Wow, so quite a range. That's brilliant, because you know, our children are also unique and different, and although their needs might be similar, there are occasions when individual needs need to be met. So it's really brilliant that that's taken into consideration. So if I feel my child could benefit from an intervention within school that the school's not currently providing, or feels, you know, has previously felt unable to provide, can I go back to the school and have a conversation with the SENCO, the you know, key most important person, and maybe the head, about whether there is the possibility of a provision being met through the Cluster Fund project?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I would always recommend parents should always talk to SENCOs and talk to teachers, but yes, definitely. I think that's the best route through, because it would be very difficult for clusters to take direct referrals or requests from parents. But certainly parents are really key to this. And I think some of our most effective support has been where we've supported the child in school, and we've done parenting programs and support as well. So yes, do encourage parents to go and talk to SENCOs. If the SENCO is unclear and doesn't quite know, as much about the cluster as they should, then there's also the lead SENCOs. So, and all of that information is on the local offer pages now on the South Glos way, documentation on.
How will I know that my school is involved in the Cluster Fund project? Is this something schools are good at communicating with parents presently, or will I need to find out, if, you know, myself, by asking questions, if an intervention is, you know, as a result of the Cluster Fund project?
I've kind of got two answers to this. So one answer is you probably wouldn't need to know, because if everything is working really well and your child and you are being offered support because the child needs that in the school, it doesn't matter too much where the funding is coming from. It's part of the offer within that school and within the locality. But equally, we haven't been very good so far at publicising what the clusters are doing, and that's an area where we're trying to improve from this point onwards, really. So we haven't done newsletters and things, and we need to do that kind of thing. And we're asking schools to make parents more aware of what's available and what we're doing. We haven't, I don't think we've kind of sold our the good aspects of this project, partly because we've just been getting on with it and just trying to do it. But so I think that's an area for definitely for development going forward. But yeah, coming back to my first offer, I just hope that by doing the cluster and using this money really effectively, we're kind of enhancing the whole offer, so that we have less complaints about, you know, my child needs something, because we've actually thought about it and put that in place. The funding is different from perhaps the funding on an EHCP plan, in that we tend to allocate funding for 6 weeks and then review, and then 12 weeks, and we try and do a sort of short intervention to try and affect change. We're trying to evaluate the impact really carefully, because there's no point putting support in if it's not actually helping. So it's a bit different.
Yeah, so this is part of the plan, do and review.
Definitely. Yeah, so it shouldn't, it's not replacing anything, it's additional. So, you know, schools should already have their plan, do, review cycle in place. And if they come to us and ask for some support or access to a particular professional, and then we will tend to say, well, what have you done already? Because you need to be, you know, we need to be developing practice. So one of the key pieces of work is every school is encouraged within the 3 years to have a whole school SEN review. So to look at the systems that are in place to see if they're working as well as they could. And it's not like an Ofsted or an inspection, it's very much a peer review. So we have lots of SENCOs and heads that have done the training that will go to schools, review their colleagues' work and give advice and support. That's come out of some work in London, which was incredibly effective. So it's got a good, you know, really good evaluation base. So we're hoping that will really help schools that have just either sometimes just done the same thing for a long time and just need a bit of a fresh eyes and look at it, or a school where actually they need some support to change some of the systems and processes. The other bit that I've really enjoyed doing work with is transitions. And I think as long as I've been involved in South Gloucestershire, everybody has complained about transitions, and yet, you know, a child comes from early years settings into reception or year 6 to year 7. And so this year we've actually been trying to support, we've identified children that we think might struggle, and then we've put a package of support to support that transition. And sometimes it might be the person that they know really well from the primary school actually going to see them in the secondary school. It's not necessarily massively complicated, it's that support to just help them ease into a new area. So that's been interesting. That's worked quite well in some of the clusters this year, and we'll start it in the other ones.
The project's still in pilot phase. What's the likelihood or chances that it's going to be formalised as an approach ongoing?
I think from my perspective, I can't say whether it will or won't, but I feel that there's a lot of support amongst head teachers for the project. They've enjoyed the work and they've found the value in it. So I think there's a support from head teachers to continue it. And that's also conversations would happen in schools forum and with elected members around continuing the programme. But as long as we can demonstrate impact, because it's great that we've got all these services, but if it doesn't show an impact, and if I go back to those 3 outcomes at the beginning, you know, we do need to see that better outcomes for children at SEN Support, which is the first one, the second one around better identification of needs, and the third one around reduced or improved behaviour and reduced exclusions. So that's the real test, but I'm hopeful that it will go forward, and I think it should do. I see no reason to not at this point, but you know, we'll see.
So if you wanted parents and carers to take away one key bit of information or one key philosophical underpinning for the project, what would it be? What's the most important thing?
I think what I like about the project is that it is focused on children at SEN Support. And I've been in lots of meetings with parents where parents have said, and perhaps a parent that's got a child, a bit like yourself, I think, with a plan, and a child that hasn't got a plan. And you know, you can see what support you can get for a child with a plan, but it's less clear what can be put in place. So I think what we're trying to do is just have a broader level of services that schools can access to support the children at SEN Support. And we hope that, you know, in time, if we can get in earlier, support earlier, then we can actually really impact on that child's outcomes in terms of their attainment and the behaviour. So I think that's my takeaway, but it is quite difficult because some of it is kind of not hidden. Some of it's a bit hidden to parents. So if it's working brilliantly, a parent might not see it. That would be my kind of vision almost.
Well, that's it. I mean, my kids, like most other people's kids, tell them absolutely nothing about their school day when they get home. So I don't often hear about the good stuff that's been going on, and then I will find out during a meeting, sort of several months afterwards, and I think, why did no one mention this? This is really good. Like I would, you know, been encouraging this and would have, you know, been really positive and been able to give that good feedback that, yeah, this is the right approach. And I'm really pleased as a parent that opportunities are lost, isn't it? But yeah, it's that communication thing, which, yeah, it's a challenge everywhere.
One of the heads said that he, this is in one of the school's forum reports, but he said this is the most exciting project he's been working on for years and years. I think from the last 10 years, I think he said, in South Gloucestershire. And you know, it would be great to have him on. You should do a call with him. But he's very enthusiastic about having the power as head teachers to put things in place that they know need to be put in place. And the plan to give the money to schools to find the solutions. You know, it's for them to identify. And some things we've tried and they didn't work, and we've stopped doing them. So we have learned from the early pilot stage with the first 2 clusters. That was important.
That's brilliant, because I mean, historically, we've had a lot of parents comment that schools have said, "Oh, we'd love to do this, but just can't afford it. We don't have the funds." So this is a way of addressing that sort of lack of funds to be able to meet needs.
I think also the clusters are keen to support groups that are already out there. So we worked with a voluntary group that provided support for parents around children with anxiety, and that's been immensely. We did that with Cluster 1, which is the sort of Almondsbury schools, and that's been immensely popular. So you know, it's a two-way process. There may be providers and groups out there that the heads don't know about, I'm sure there are, that actually could really offer support. So it's probably a two-way process going forward.
Oh, that's a really good point. I mean, because we know of lots of, you know, great services locally, you know, hand disability or more sort of specific out there that do some great work. So it's good to have sort of more involved and sort of joined up working sort of across South Glos as a whole.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's a bit like a network of support and training and input.
Yeah, that's it. And embedding a cultural approach, isn't it? Across South Glos, which I'm really hoping the SEND Inclusion Toolkit will help with.
Definitely. So we're working together. Sorry, we're working together very much with that. So we're trying to use the same forms, because you know, and all of the same documentation. We don't want to be having 2 lots, one with a cluster and one with South Glos Way. So we're aligning all of that to make sure it's the same.
Yeah, I have another little meeting planned with Kim Lloyd for the SEND Inclusion Toolkit. So we'll be doing a little Q&A ourselves on that, just to introduce it.
Brilliant.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for your time, Kate. This has been really lovely to find out a little bit more about the Cluster Fund project and how it might have a positive impact for our families and, most importantly, our children going forward.
Yeah, no, definitely. No, it's been great fun. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you.